Hi, I'm Peter Whittle. Now, just a very quick message from me, a reminder about our upcoming national conference. It's on Saturday, the 22nd of April. That's the day before St. George's Day in Birmingham. Do get your tickets. It will be a great day. So to do that, just go to the link below this video. That's our conference, NCF in Birmingham, 22nd of April. See you then.
You're watching Deprogrammed. I'm Harrison Pitt, a writer for the European Conservative, and today I'm going to be talking about transgenderism with Evan Riggs, who is a freelance journalist, and Jess Gill, who is the host of Reason UK. And before we get going, we're going to watch a clip of Jess in action.
What is a woman?
Oh, that's a question. I don't know. I used to know.
What is a woman?
Precious human being, I'd say.
What is a woman?
Any person who feels that they're a woman and or were born as a woman.
What does it mean to feel like a woman?
That ranges for every single person and how they feel that for themselves. For me, I think it's mainly how other people view me in society.
So Jess, clearly you've been making a bit of a nuisance of yourself on the streets of Britain. What's it been like engaging with people on these sorts of points?
Yeah, it's been interesting everywhere from Manchester to London. No one can define what a woman is, apparently. People think that I edit it out, I just select answers. I include everyone who I interview, and no one can define that a woman is an adult human female. It's so silly. What has the world come to?
Yes, no, it is extraordinary, Evan.
Well, I think it's a sad state of affairs where people who are, clearly at least moderately intelligent are using every last brain cell that they can to lie straight to your face. Like, we all sort of intrinsically know what a woman is, and it's kind of like the bell curve meme, right? Like, you've got absolute idiots on one end who just can basically say it's a adult human female, and then you've got people who are willing to actually tell the truth and have a little bit of intelligence as well as character. We're not afraid of the social, penalties that might come with just stating an obvious fact. And then you have all these people kind of here in the middle, which are being featured in your videos, who are coming up with these like lengthy paragraphs to explain away obvious nonsense. We all know what a woman is.
It also goes to show how sort of skin deep, confused and unsophisticated this ideology is. I mean, the fact that even its most sort of fanatical adherents, under reasonably gentle questioning, I mean, you're not going in all guns blazing, you're just asking what is a woman, you're making standard definitional questions, just asking them to explain themselves. And these are the most sort of, as I say, the most fanatical adherents. They can't explain it. And so it in many ways, it does have all the hallmarks of a cult that is very much sort of making itself up as it goes along. And I think the even more extraordinary thing is not just that they're incapable of defending this ideology, despite being incapable of defending it, despite being incapable of, as you say, Evan, of even defending it to themselves in their own sort of private thoughts, they nevertheless have the confidence and the arrogance to feel as though they're entitled to assert this ideology onto everybody else. I wonder where that arrogance comes from if they can't actually explain the ideology. Do you have thoughts on that, Jess?
Yeah, I don't think they actually think about it. A common thing that people say, conservatives say, is that they're scared to say the real thing. They know what it is, but they're scared to say it. We all know that they know what a woman is, but I don't think it's fear. I think they just haven't thought about this. I don't think they're scared of the repercussions of saying that a woman is an adult human female. I just think they think it's fine to be, they want to be tolerant. They don't see the consequences of this gender ideology, which is women, men going into women's spaces, competing in women's sports, the stuff with children, with the Tavistock Clinic, as we've seen, all these really awful things on society. They don't see that. They just see pronoun badges and put pronouns in your bio and this inclusivity thing. So I think it's so important that we change the narrative with that, because once people start to think, and you can tell that they've not thought about this. When I ask them, they've not thought about this. They've not tried to justify it's in their own mind. They've just accepted it. And you can see them trying to justify it and come up with answers. It's just so interesting.
It is extremely interesting. It's also funny in a way that, I mean, this is an orthodoxy which began to start taking root probably in around 2015. I mean, in 2012, no one was really talking about any of this. And I think that comes across quite well. There's the moment which I think is most instructive in the video, the moment which I think, it's only 3 words or so, but it contains a lot of substance when one of the women you were asking in that video says, "Oh, I used to know. I used to know what a woman was in those those simpler days of 2014."
Yeah, I mean, I was watching a video of the new Prime Minister of New Zealand a few days ago, who's a 40-year-old man. So 10 years ago, I'm sure he would have been able to define it. And now he's running like a major Western country.
Yes.
And someone just asks him, "What is a woman?" And he just sits there and like terrified.
Funny.
So he's like, "I'm not a biologist." or you have this.
You went. Oh, you stumped me with that one.
Yeah. Or it's like this recent Supreme Court justice who was brought in a year ago in America.
Jackson, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
They asked her when they were swearing her in,
Yes.
and they have to go through like this interview process
Yes.
publicly, and she was like, "That's
Yes.
what she said. I'm not a biologist."
Yes.
And I think the problem is that, we all know these are lies. I think this sort of gender ideology does have a few fanatics who are deeply confused, but when you lie like that, even if you think it's a very small lie or a white lie, basically just because you want to be agreeable and you want to kind of go along to get along. It reminds me a lot of stories of prisoners of war, actually, in Vietnam. And what would happen is they would try to get these guys to denounce America. And what they would do,
people who've been captured by the
people who've been
Vietnamese.
captured, exactly. And you can't just immediately put a camera into their face and say like, okay, like tell us about the great Satan in the West.
Yeah.
What would happen is they would try to get them to make small lies and small concessions. He's like, okay, America's not a perfect country. And then they give you like a little extra rice and they let you sleep a little bit longer. And gradually over a time span of months, you go from, okay, America's not perfect to America is evil. And by the time that a lot of these guys got rescued, they fully believed it.
Yes.
And it was this sort of slow, gradual move away from what they truly believed until they were completely brainwashed.
Yes.
And I think the same thing is happening with not only adults who used to be able to define what a woman is, but also to a lot of young people who have been completely captured by this ideology. And I think the deprogramming of these people is going to be like a generational effort.
That's why we're here. We're trying to get it started. Yes. What do you think? I don't know whether either of you have thoughts on this. What would be the purpose of engaging in that sort of project? Why are people? I mean, it makes sense that the North Vietnamese, in a time of war, might want to degrade and humiliate, prisoners of war. Why do elites in advanced Western societies want to degrade and humiliate their own people?
Well,
if that is what's going on, I mean, I suspect you might be right about that.
I don't know if it's I think the degradation is a sort of secondary effect. I think a lot of this is luxury beliefs, which is a term coined by Rob Henderson. It's a way to kind of status signal. And we've seen this with a lot of charities like GLAAD in America, which was originally about moving forward gay rights. Well, gay people have all the same rights. They can get married now. They can have kids. So these organizations didn't just self-destruct. They had to find a new thing to kind of press on with, and they decided to land on trans.
Sure.
I do think a lot of it is also just pure resentment, and a lot of these people who are dealing with their own personal identity issues really want to tear down women like Jess or Posey Parker, who I know you were defending out in the park, because they represent something that they can never be. So you have a lot of people getting kind of pushed and prodded along by a sort of hyper-agreeable status signaling elite into genuine mental illness. And as we've seen recently in America, violence.
Yes, you speak about Rob Henderson there, who is doing valuable work on this phenomenon that you describe as luxury beliefs. He's working at Cambridge at the moment. And one of the things he talks about in relation to luxury beliefs is that any sort of harm caused by these beliefs is the elites are shielded from those harms. So they work as status signals because they don't actually have a material effect on the people who subscribe to those beliefs. Why do you think that that's a mistaken view to take of many of these sort of transgenderist dogmas? Why do you think they in fact are costly and they cannot afford to be treated as mere luxury beliefs?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a bit different from immigration because, every woman uses public toilets. Every woman, a lot of women, regardless of class, do sports. A lot of people, a lot of parents whose children went to the Tavistock clinic were probably middle class.
Yes.
So I don't think it's really a class thing. But I do think there are a lot of people who don't see the negative side of this until they are impacted by this. Like there was a video of this girl crying, and it was really sad. And basically what happened was that because Primark made their this was like a few months ago. They've reverted the policy now, because they made the changing rooms unisex. Anyone could go in, and this young girl felt exposed because men kept on like peeking through the changing rooms, and that safeguard wasn't there anymore. That gender wasn't there anymore. And exposed us to that. But even in the video, she was still like, "Oh, I'm pro-trans people. I understand the importance of this." It's so sad.
Still feels the need to signal, even though has been harmed by them.
Or she's actively crying as well.
While actively crying, she's sort of still saying, "I'm not a bigot."
Yeah.
That might be motivated by fear, given that she's sort of been propelled into the public eye. Do you have something to say about it?
Well, I think a lot of these people are just terrified because, I mean, if the wrong video goes out and goes viral of you, you know, even just stating a simple biological fact these days, I mean, depending on where you work, you could lose your job, you could lose your friends. I mean, people are really coming for the TERFs and for the dedicated mums on Mumsnuts.
Of course,
like,
I mean, we saw. Go on, continue.
Just that, you know, we only have to look at what happened to Posey Parker in New Zealand, or to this girl Riley Games or Grimes or whatever in America at.
Explain what happened to Riley.
She's sort of like a college level swimmer who was kind of originally catapulted to fame because this biological male swimmer came in and just started dominating the fields, and so she went from, you know, first to second place overnight after, you know, an entire life's worth of work.
Sure.
And she went and did a speech, I think it was at San Francisco State University or City University, and she was chased off stage and barricaded into a room by these sort of sane gender activists who then demanded that she give them all each $10 and they would let her go home.
Doesn't sound remotely arbitrary.
Well, these people are clearly motivated by just kindness and compassion, and they really just, you know, want to make sure that trans people are treated with respect, which is why they're chasing young women through university hallways.
This is something we're going to get to at the moment, because we've been talking about the sort of the illogic of trans ideology, but I think it's something which is becoming increasingly a threat in Western countries. But before do you think? I wonder if you're optimistic, Jess. Do you think that enough of these examples, the fact that every week now we see examples of just trans madness proliferating on social media, do you sense that there is a civilized backlash brewing?
A part of me thinks so, but mostly like it's so depressing when you go out in the street, even in Liverpool. The first time I did a Vox Pop, asked the question. This was before Matt Walsh did it. I did it first.
You coined it?
Yeah.
Have you tried to claim some of the money he made off What Is a Woman?
But I went out in Liverpool. I had like no idea what was going to happen.
Sure.
This was the first time I did it. I was really nervous as well.
Yes.
And so I just asked people. I asked people a range of ages and stuff. And they all said they couldn't define what a woman is. None of them could define what a woman is in Liverpool as well. So a part of me is like, no, I don't see much hope for the future. There's so much amazing activism from the gender critical community. Like I was at a protest the other day with Posey Parker, a speaking event.
Sure.
And it was so amazing to see these women, mothers, women with jobs, they have other commitments in their lives, dedicate, you know, all this time towards this movement. It's clearly something they're passionate about. And I really want to be optimistic about that, because it's so amazing to see women so passionate about this. Like, I dare say it's the biggest thing since Brexit.
Yes.
But on the other side as well, like, everyone believes in it. When I was at school, which was 2 years ago, I was in sixth form, and we celebrated World Pronouns Day.
It's quite the celebration.
Yeah.
God.
Two of my friends, it was lockdown accelerated everything. Two of my friends came out as non-binary. It was absolute madness. These are people particularly vulnerable as well.
Yes.
One of them was raised in a cult, and she got out of that, and now she's
into a new one.
Yeah.
Reverting back to the mean.
Reverting back to the mean.
The other one was this guy I knew since primary school. I spoke about this during the protest, during the speaking event the other day.
Sure.
I knew him since primary school. He tried to kill himself in primary school. Clearly some background home issues going on. After lockdown, he comes to me, he's like, Jess, I'm gender fluid. And I'm just like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know, I'm confused.
Really?
And he's now...
It's a very honest answer in a way.
Yes.
Yeah, but he's now doubled down on this.
Okay.
He's going by a woman's name. And I just think, like, the system's failed them completely.
Massively.
The education system, the NHS, they've completely failed them, because what if he, you know, wants to go through surgery and all that when he didn't have to? He just needed help. He just needed support.
Exactly. This is one of the points that was made. I think it was roughly August, wasn't it, that Dr. Hilary Casey's report on the Tavistock Clinic, August of last year, obviously, that came out. And one of the points which Dr. Casey made is that there needs to be a much more holistic approach to the way in which these clearly very confused young people who often have sort of cognate disorders, whether it's autism or other sort of mental health issues, which are really motivating this confusion, and yet they, you know, the urge from the left-wing establishment is that, no, we need to affirm this confused form of gender identity. I mean, Joe Biden even said recently in an interview that it was sinful of for, you know, governors in states like Texas, Tennessee, and Florida to be limiting the access that children can have to this gender-affirming care, which can be sort of mutilating and incredibly dangerous.
I mean, again, Joe Biden is like 80 years old. And the idea that he held these beliefs even when he was 72 is just patently insane. And I think a lot of the pushback from this is going to come, it's going to come from a few different directions. I mean, I know people are pretty pessimistic about the state of the UK, but in a way, I think compared to New Zealand or Canada or America, Britain has kind of the best chance of fighting back against a lot of this. You know, Turf Island is kind of held strong. But I think America, if you look at, you know, the way...
You just call England Turf Island?
I have not coined that phrase. I've read that online.
I like it.
Yeah. It's trans, exclusionary, radical feminist, these isles.
Not bad.
But I think if you look at Joe Biden's response in the wake of the shooting that happened in Tennessee, where he said that transgender people have always shaped the character of the nation, of America. It's like, it's just bizarre, and it's even more bizarre to say that days after, you know, a shooting at a Christian school where 6 people died, 3 of them children under 10 years old.
Absolutely.
And you come out and you double down on the trans narrative.
He made a joke as well, which is an incredibly bad taste. You couldn't picture Trump. Trump is brash, obviously everyone knows that, even people who like him know it. But you couldn't picture him in a million years being asked, you know, I think Joe Biden was asked by a right-wing reporter, you know, do you think that this shooting in Tennessee was motivated by anti-Christian hatred? And he said, I don't know. And the guy said, well, Senator Josh Hawley, who's a Republican Catholic, has said that. And he said, oh, well, in that case, I probably don't think that then. So making a sort of a very sort of a quip, which was in extremely poor taste, 3 days after 3 Christian children and 3 Christian teachers had been shot dead. And there's also the point to be made as well that whenever there is a sort of a mass shooting which was committed by, you know, a white supremacist, let's take the example of Christchurch in New Zealand, the manifesto written by that shooter is released within 2 days, because and then, you know, the usual suspects, you know, gather around that manifesto, they, you know, pick from it selectively, and they try and tar the right generally with this atrocity. In this case, you know, apparently this shooter did write such a manifesto before going on this killing rampage, and it still hasn't been released to the public. And there was a public interest in knowing exactly what this shooter was thinking. There needs to be a shared standard across the board. You can't release some manifestos to public view and not others.
Well, also too, I mean, there is a social contagion effect among shooters, and this has been well known ever since Columbine, where, you know, you have one shooting, and then within a short time period after, you'll have a bunch more, or at least attempts. And there was another attempt in Colorado, which is also a kind of a breeding ground for mass shooters because of Columbine, where a sort of gender fluid, non-binary kind of type attempted to go shoot up some schools and was thankfully stopped. But this person, he, she, however this potential shooter would like to be identified, did have a manifesto, and parts of it were released even before the Nashville shooting one, partly because it tarred folks like, I think Lauren Southern and Donald Trump were in there, this person's personal thoughts against them. So, I mean, not only have we had a little bit of a social contagion effect, which is also, you know, you could argue that trans people are kind of primed for this. You know, this is Lisa Littleman's work out of Rhode Island with autistic girls, but also you're having quite obvious sort of differentiations in the news coverage around it based on the politicization of it.
Yes. Do you sense that this is getting that obviously it's incredibly illogical, and your videos are immense fun to watch for that reason. But do you sense that as well as being a slight laughing matter, it's getting more dangerous and more demented? The rhetoric's getting much more heated to the point where these sorts of attacks, whether they're sort of just attacks on people like Posey Parker or mass shootings, are more likely. Is that what you sense?
Yeah, it's interesting because the whole trans ideology debate is harmful. Like it's harmful to trans kids. It's harmful, as in like transition kids. Trans kids don't exist. It's harmful towards the women who are impacted by this. And it just doesn't, it's illogical, it doesn't make sense. But the rhetoric itself, it's like you can tell who the good guys and the bad guys are. When you have these grown men screaming at women, like it's terrible, it's abusive, it's awful. And with the Posey Parker thing as well, it is heartbreaking to see these brave women standing up against these raging men, and they're unapologetic about it. I remember in Manchester, actually, where I'm from, there was a group, I can't remember which group, but a gender critical group, and I think it was just a meeting in a private building, but this led to a mass protest by trans rights activists, and they were screaming, "TERFs, get off our effing turf." Like this massive group, there must have been like at least 100 raging outside that building. That's so threatening, that's so intimidating.
Have you ever felt intimidated when you go to these sorts of events yourself? I mean, but one thing it's a slight detour perhaps, but I mean, you mentioned when you were younger and you heard these sorts of ideas being passed around. Why do you think you never sort of, why do you think you slipped the net? Why do you think you never bought into them, which you clearly have? And why do you think you never bought into them? And do you feel scared when you're going to these events and being very public facing with your opinions?
So the reason why I don't think I've been brought into it is because of Ben Shapiro. Thanks,
Ben.
Yeah, I was, before I knew anything about this, I was watching Ben Shapiro videos when I was like 14.
Oh, great.
And that was great, that was fantastic. So I only saw that side of it. I saw the illogical side of it first before I was like subject to that, and I really enjoy politics, obviously. So looking at it from a political perspective instead of just accepting it as just common knowledge, I think that's really helped. What was the second question?
Oh yeah, no, that's very interesting. But do you feel fearful when you go to these places?
Well, I don't.
After what happened to Posey Parker and others.
Yeah, so the last one, not really, because there were so many women supportive, and there were men there as well, so that was fine. But I went to, the one time I did feel fearful, I was at a protest. I always get really nervous going to these protests because with street interviews, like, you're probably not going to get attacked by the average person on the street. But
at a protest.
Yeah. So we try and I don't want to do it. I would rather be like out and proud. But if I go in like, "Hi, I'm a right-wing media organisation," they're not going to say anything.
No, sure.
So I'm just like, "What's your opinion on this? What's your opinion?" And this one was on conversion therapy, trans conversion therapy, which is basically trying to stop doctors and medical professionals
from telling boys that they're boys and girls that they're girls.
Exactly, bandits. And
stop converting children. Sorry.
Well, literally converting children.
Exactly.
But so I went to this protest, and there were also trans people there, and again, big grown men, very scary. And nothing came about it. Like, I wasn't attacked or anything. But they got the microphone, the megaphone, and anytime I tried to speak to someone, then realised who were, they just screamed in our face.
Drown you out, silence you.
But luckily, nothing's happened.
Well, that's good. I mean, it is absolutely true that it is becoming much more violent, much more demented. But I do think it is the rhetoric which helps to feed this. Because, for example, I'll give you an example. The term transgender genocide is very much doing the rounds on social media, particularly in these sorts of ideological circles. And if you think about it, if you genuinely subscribe to the belief that trans people in our society, because of this, the systemic framework of our society, are sort of face an ever-present danger of genocide, what won't you do to try and prevent that? So all of a sudden, assault and even murder becomes perversely sort of self-defense. Yeah, it's once you framed the debate in that way. And just one more point, Evan. The other thing I find interesting about that is that sort of the opinion-forming establishment gives credence to that term transgender, transgender genocide. So I'll give you an example. If you go I encourage our viewers to do this. If you go onto Wikipedia right now and type in transgender genocide, it will give you a definition which makes it sound like a completely uncontentious, completely sensible, a completely neutral sociological concept. It even says a sociological concept used by activists and scholars, making it sound sort of dignifying it with that sort of description. Yet, if you go on to and then type into the Wikipedia about this, type in cultural Marxism, which I would argue is a much more sort of accurate description of a real phenomenon in the world, unlike transgender genocide. And in the first sentence it says, cultural Marxism is a far-right anti-Semitic conspiracy theory.
When Ben Shapiro uses it.
When Ben Shapiro uses it.
Yeah.
So it's not just that this rhetoric is in existence and spreading in these circles, it's given credence by the opinion-forming classes in our society, and that makes it even more dangerous when it's not sort of called out and condemned.
Well, I don't know. I think on the transgender genocide question, it's not necessarily, in a way they're being more honest than they realize, because they're not specifically talking about like the actual murdering of trans people. I believe that there were 2 hate crimes against transgender people in America in 2022 or 2021, which is, a third of the amount of kids who were killed in this last mass shooting.
Sure.
But what they're talking about really is the total eradication of the gender ideology or transgenderism, which, if it does happen, will lead to the kind of dissolution of a lot of this trans movement and this growing body of people who are now kind of the foot soldiers for sort of leftist hegemony.
I would agree with you that they're being sort of equivocal with their use of the term genocide, but they're certainly aware of the fact. They're certainly aware of the sort of profound emotional content that term has. Otherwise, they wouldn't use it. And the reason why they do use it, rather than a more neutral term, like sort of the eradication of the ideology from the public sphere. If they use that, which is a truer description of what people like us would ideally like to see happen, if they use that term, it's not going to have the same sort of emotional impact on people. So they're sort of, if they're playing a sort of a very cynical bait and switch game, and I think it's one that we should very much call out.
Oh yeah, no, we should definitely not underestimate the leftist capability for propaganda. In the days following the shooting in the U.S., you had in multiple states, you had activists basically storming government buildings, holding up 7 fingers, which was supposed to be for 7 victims. So the 6 people who were killed by the shooter, and then the shooter who was killed by the police, the 7th victim, I guess, who is been victimized by the society, which refused to accept them. But just the fact that you would have the kind of moral zealotry to willingness to like break into government buildings and then claim that with basically standing over the parents of slain children, you have to be a total fanatic. But you shouldn't underestimate the power of propaganda like that, because
it can exercise people into a state where they're willing to inflict violence on completely innocent people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's one of the things that one of the points that Alexander Solzhenitsyn makes in the Gulag Archipelago. He talks about the difference between pre-modern evil and modern evil, and he uses the example of Shakespeare's characters. He says even Shakespeare's villains, people like Iago in Othello, people like Edmund in King Lear, they never really kill more than about 4 or 5 people, because they tend to be, because it could be partly because it's a play, but also because it's motivated by ambition or sort of greed. But Solzhenitsyn says, but in the modern age, modern villains, and he's obviously thinking about people like Stalin and Pol Pot and Mao, people will kill millions. And why is that? Because they have sort of ideological they have elaborate ideological justifications for that evil, which Shakespeare's characters lacked. Shakespeare's characters, he says, didn't have any ideology, and as such, Shakespeare's villains never get further than about 4 or 5 corpses. That's what Solzhenitsyn says in the Gulag Archipelago.
Well, to refer off of Shakespeare, my favorite play of his, Coriolanus, which is the only Shakespeare play to ever be banned in a Western country. It was banned in Germany when Germany was being put back together. Too militaristic. Fun fact.
Yes, that's interesting.
But the question I would like to ask you, Jess, is there's this famous line in this play where he says, only fire can drive out a fire, only one nail can drive out a nail, as he's talking about, kind of returning to take his vengeance upon Rome. And he's like, we have to kind of, meet them with the full force that they're attacking us with. And I think a lot of this was actually an issue with Matt Walsh and Constantine Kissin. They got into it about this, where it's like, well, we need to be accepting of these people, and we need to, meet them halfway and try to persuade other people that, to walk back from some of the more outrageous claims here. But I'm not sure if this is really a successful strategy. I think that the response to this kind of transmania, which is, becoming more violent and is certainly more fanatical now by the day, a proper counter response to this, do you think it's going to be coming from doing vox pops on the streets and just kind of getting people to confront the absurdity of their own beliefs? Do you think it'll come from kind of coming on podcasts and writing articles and essays, kind of disentangling this ideology and pointing out where it's absurd? Or do you think that there's going to have to be something with a little bit more force behind it? That could be legally, or it might even just be sort of ethically and an intensity, like meeting them head on with the same amount of zeal that they're, attacking these poor women with.
Yeah, I'm not for compromise at all. I think if you're a biological man who wants to go into a woman's toilets, I'm not compromising with that.
Good.
Same with the children stuff. I think if you want to harm kids, I'm not compromising with that. That's absolutely insane. I think you have to fight feelings with feelings. I think you have to realise, despite, Ben Shapiro, my hero, facts don't care about your feelings, I think feelings really do matter. It's not just, saying that a woman is not a human female, it's what's behind that. It's, how this impacts people, whether that be the girl in Primark crying, or all these women getting hurt, Posey Park getting soup on. That's awful. And I think that's the only way to expose them, to expose the consequences of what's going on. I think that's how you do it.
Yes.
Because people just think it's about tolerance and inclusion when it's not. It's about hurting women and children, and men as well. Men are caught in the fire with this. And I think that's the only way, when you realise, this is the actual impact of that. As you were saying before, the trans activists, they think, it is a transgenocide. They are loaded up. And when you have that perspective, it's easy to not justify, but to understand why they do that kind of stuff. But you have to, the only way to fight that is to say, this is the other side. Women are getting hurt. Children, vulnerable children are getting hurt. And we need to take that into consideration. And I think, but another thing as well, also you have to understand, I do disagree with some of what Matt Walsh, his rhetoric. I don't care about being nice, but I do think you have to realise when it comes to kids, for example, I think of my friend who I was talking about before, who had problems at home and then he came out as gender fluid and then a woman. I don't want there to be more people like him. I think there could have been a better solution to him, a happier ending with that, rather than him being so insecure about himself that he wants to possibly go through harmful surgery. I think when it comes to people like that who are maybe have mental health issues, maybe don't conform to gender stereotypes, I think we need to come at them from a human perspective. Say look, I understand you have these issues, but you shouldn't have to go through this awful surgery. You shouldn't have to go on puberty blockers. That won't make you feel better. And it doesn't make any sense. Do
you think that there's a difference? I'm quite sympathetic to what you just said, but do you think there's a difference between engaging this issue in the public square, where I think we do need to, as you were just saying, to fight feelings with feelings, we do need to be incredibly robust, and dealing on an interpersonal level with loved ones that we have? I mean, so for example, if I had a cousin who was feeling this way inclined, I wouldn't be sort of delivering the full ire of Matt Walsh onto him.
No, and nor should you.
And nor should I. Yeah. But if it's in the public sphere and there is a debate saying what is a woman, and you've got a very badly motivated, bad faith activists on one side, I think the way you would treat that person, it's the same. I would treat them very
differently
to how I would treat victims of that ideology in my personal life.
Yeah. I would 100% agree.
But you're not going to convert Dylan Mulvaney, for example.
Sure.
But like you said, if you had a cousin like that, if you have a friend like that, you can have this conversation. And oftentimes, they can't justify it in their head. And when you come up with alternatives, maybe say to them, maybe if you're the only reasonable voice in their life because everyone else doesn't understand this.
Sure.
If you say to them, maybe think this through, this is the actual implications. One of the things in Time to Think, Hannah Barnes's recent book about Tavistock, basically the effect of puberty blockers means that it's so affirming that they basically just go on
they double down on the feelings.
Yeah, they double down on it. And so I think if you have that voice, if you have that voice of reason to say, actually, maybe this is the solution, I think that's the way forward. And I think that's the harm also of treating transgenderism as an ideology, because if you go against it, you're seen as bigoted.
Yes.
that's the issue.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, one possibly, hopeful thought is that if it only took about 7 years to overturn millennia of common sense, it can't take us that long with the sort of passion that you embody, Jess, and that we certainly share. It can't take that long for us to overturn 7 years of madness.
Yeah, I don't think this is actually going to be with us by the time we hit, 2035 or whatever. But I do think that the wind down from, kind of the hysteria that we've built into our culture at this point is going to be pretty scary.
It's going to be collateral damage.
And shocking. And I worry too about a lot of, there's a lot of brave detransitioners now. So people who transitioned in one form or another and have kind of wound it back, coming out now, and some of them are even, suing some of these clinics that fast-tracked them into like mastectomies when they were 16, or sterilization, which is another thing that's happening to a lot of young gay men.
Yes.
Who, basically, if you give them enough time, will realize, no, I'm a man, I'm just gay, I'm not a woman. But the problem is like once you've taken this sort of, hormonal doses at the level that is being prescribed to them, they're basically permanently sterilized, which is not a huge problem with gay men, but also impotent, which I hear is not a lot of fun. And I think that the wind down, some of these people are going to come out, these detransitioners, and they're going to become the best allies for the movement, who wants to see kind of careful and humane winding back of transmania. But a lot of these people now have they're going to be falling prey to a sunk cost fallacy. Like, well, I've done this
I'm so far into it, I may as well wait further.
Exactly. And I think that these are the people who are going to become especially scary. And this is just something I'm more and more worried about now after, the events in America. But I think this is not going to last, but we're not even close to, peak trans, which I know has been argued about online. I think we've got a way to go before things start getting seriously de-escalated.
Would you agree with that?
I don't think it's just been around for 7 years. This has been around for decades, since like John Money and all that stuff. But I also don't think it's just going to be enough with voices. Even though we've had a conservative government for the past decade or so, that's not been enough, because we have like legislation like the Equality Act, the Gender Recognition Act, pumping it up, NGOs, the Blob, civil service, they're all perpetuating this ideology, teaching it in schools. And I think that's the main issue. I think it's going to be a bigger beast to battle than Dylan Mulvaney getting a Nike sponsorship.
I think you're right, but we're here for the long haul, and reality has a way of catching up with fantasy sooner or later, and hopefully, Godspeed that journey. Thank you very much for joining me, Jess Gill and Evan Riggs. You've been watching Deprogrammed, and we shall see you next week.
Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.